I, 55F, have two children, George, 31M, and Gabrielle, 29F. Gabrielle recently got engaged, and I am helping her plan the wedding in my spare time, which the entire family is very excited about, except for George. George recently divorced his wife of 7 years, Susanna, 28F, after he said the spark had gone out. They have a set of twins together, Amy and Alice, 6F, and are trying to set up a healthy co-parenting relationship. Susanna is a great mother to my grandkids, and I was disappointed in George for giving up on their relationship so fast without even trying couples counseling. However, it wasn't my business or place to say anything. The drama started when George brought his new girlfriend to dinner at my house. He met his girlfriend, Bethany, 25F, through a work colleague, and they have been dating for 4 months. At dinner, Gabrielle and I were discussing flower arrangements, and Bethany felt the need to ask George if he'd ever marry again. George coughed before replying that he'd have to think about it, which seemed to deflate Bethany. Well, this caused Alice to cry about how she wants mommy and daddy to love each other again. George and Bethany just sat there while my granddaughter screamed. After I comforted Alice, I pulled George aside and asked if he was sure about Bethany, to which he told me it was none of my business. I reminded him that it was my business who he invited into my home and my grandchildren's lives, as I've been caring for them in my spare time while he works. He and Susanna have 50-50 custody, but he can't afford daycare with the child support and alimony he owes Susanna, so I agreed to babysit as a favor to him and to help him save money. George got angry and said it was Gabrielle's fault for mentioning weddings in the first place. I told him to stop acting like a child and to be happy for his sister. Then Bethany felt the need to insert herself and tell me that she and George were together, no matter how much I liked his ex-wife. After that, I was done with the conversation and asked them both to get out. George and Bethany stormed off, flipped me the bird, and left my grandchildren at my house at 7 p.m. I had to call Susanna to collect the children since they had school in the morning, and I was attending a cake tasting with Gabrielle the next day. I feel like I shouldn't have to tell my 31-year-old son to be happy for his sister, or argue with a random woman whom I have never met before in my own home. Update 1. This situation happened a few hours ago, and I thought it was right to provide an update. Bethany came to my house to apologize for how she acted at dinner last week. She told me that she was 2 months pregnant, and George had broken up with her after she told him, because he said he had too many responsibilities and didn't want to be in the baby's life. I then spent the better part of 3 hours talking with Bethany about the baby and what she wants. She says she wants to keep the baby even if George refuses to be in their life, and I told her that I would help with childcare if she needs it since she doesn't have any family that lives nearby. Before I got angry with George, I thought I would call him and give him a chance to explain. George was angry that Bethany had shown up at my house and insisted that it wasn't his baby. I told him that he should get a paternity test, and he asked me for $500 to cover it since he's struggling. I told George that he needs to figure it out himself since he's about to be a father of 3, and that he'd better step up and do right by his kids. He didn't say anything after that, he just hung up. Well, 2 hours later, I get a call from Susanna to say that George hadn't picked up the kids like he'd previously agreed to, and could she drop them at my place because she had work. I agreed for her to drop Amy and Alice off and tried to call George again. I called 12 times, and they all went to voicemail. I don't know where George is and have called his place of employment to try to find out, however, they refused to tell me anything. I've agreed to watch Amy and Alice until Wednesday, and Susanna has reported this incident to CPS. I assume she plans to file for full custody, and I can't blame her. Right now, I'm worried that George has run off somewhere or done something irresponsible. I am disgusted and will not be doing him any favors in the future unless he has a very good explanation and accepts some responsibility. Update 2. Okay, so I made the original post about 2 months ago, and since then, things have been a bit crazy lately, so I just wanted to update as I had people asking if George was okay. In my first post, people suggested I give George some space and time to figure things out as a recently divorced father, but after he ran off around 2 months ago, I ended up filing a missing persons report. I talked to George's workplace the day after I filed the report, and they told me he had given his 2 weeks about a month ago. I then tried calling George again, and he finally picked up. He told me he was okay, but had moved states and no longer wanted any contact with his children because it was all too much responsibility for him. I snapped at George and told him he couldn't just decide now he didn't want to be a father. Then George told me he never wanted kids in the first place and that the kids don't look anything like him anyway. George then told me to screw off and hung up the call. After that, I informed the police department about what had happened to let them know George wasn't in any danger and that we knew his whereabouts. After that happened, I just cried because I couldn't believe I had raised such a selfish person. Susanna has filed for full custody, and George, as far as I know, is refusing to pay child support and will probably end up in jail at some point. As for Bethany, she is now 4 months pregnant and is having a boy, and George is the father. Somehow he managed to come up with the $500, so he will have to pay child support since he doesn't plan on being in the baby's life. Bethany is convinced that George will change his mind once the baby is born, which I have tried to tell her that probably won't be the case. However, she is convinced he will, and no one can tell her otherwise. She moved into my home in November since she's had trouble doing things herself, and her doctor says she's at risk of preeclampsia if she becomes too stressed during the pregnancy. In that time, we have gotten closer, and despite how our first meeting went, I have actually come to like Bethany. Sorry, this isn't the happy ending some of you were expecting. I have been following the advice I received from the first post, and I have not contacted George, and he has not tried to contact me. I can only hope that with time, he pulls himself together and manages to step up as a father. Again, thank you to everyone who gave helpful advice. I'm not sure if I will be updating further, however, I appreciate the support. Update 3. Hi Reddit, it's been over 6 months since my last update after I completely forgot about this account. Much has happened during that time, so as requested, here is the update. First of all, Gabrielle is now married to her amazing fiancé, and I couldn't be more proud. The wedding was a small family affair at his parents' farm. George did not attend the wedding, but it was a beautiful ceremony all the same. Bethany has given birth to a healthy baby boy and has found an apartment and a new job. I'm so proud of her for how well she is coping with everything. As suggested in my last post, we did get the twins therapy, and it has helped them heal throughout this whole process. After George took off and abandoned his children, our whole family needed time to heal and recover from the hurt and trauma. As for George, that's a messy situation. Roughly 4 months ago, George was found to be in possession of illegal substances and was arrested. When George first called me from the county jail, I thought he was trying to get money out of my husband and me, however, it just got worse and worse. He asked me to pay for a lawyer, and I explained that because of his actions, I couldn't afford to help him and that I couldn't trust him. George just sobbed and started apologizing for all he had done. I told him it was his kids he should be apologizing to. He kept sobbing and then told me there was another woman pregnant with his child. At first, I didn't believe him, but then he gave details, and I looked her up on Facebook. There was a picture of them as the profile picture. I hung up on him, disgusted yet still feeling somewhat responsible for what he has become. It was a few days later that we heard from George again, and he told us his trial was in 2 months. He sounded so scared, but part of me thought this was what he needed to learn consequences, though I felt disgusted at my thoughts since he's still my son who I raised. My husband and I decided to attend the trial, even though it was in the next state. We felt we had to for our son and peace of mind. I told Susanna and Bethany, and they were bewildered, declining to attend. At the trial, George was found guilty of all counts, including criminal damage, robbery, and failure to pay child support. The judge gave him 6 years with no plea deal due to evidence. I didn't know how to feel. My grandkids won't see their dad for 6 years. It's been 4 months, and I'm still confused. George calls daily, crying, apologizing, and begging us to get him out and to speak to his kids, which I've declined since Susanna hasn't given permission. Bethany decided on no contact with him or her son. I haven't reached out to his other girlfriend either, so unsure how to feel. This was depressing, but I'm glad I updated. Thank you for reading. This is probably my last post. I hope we can recover and heal from this.